Taoiseach.
I wish to announce for the information of the Dáil that, having informed the President that Dáil Éireann had approved my nomination of Deputy Jack Chambers to member of the Government, the President on the 26th of June appointed him accordingly. On the same day, I assigned the Department of Finance to Deputy Chambers. On the 27th of June 2024, on my nomination, the Government appointed Deputy James Lawless to be Minister of State at the Department of Transport, with special responsibility for international and road transport and logistics, and at the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications, with special responsibility for postal policy. Minister of State Dara Calleary will attend at Government meetings.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. We move now to Leaders' Questions under Standing Order 36. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald, please.
Margaret Cairns, before I begin, I heard the news that our colleagues, deputies Roisin Shortall and Catherine Murphy have announced that they're not going forward for re-election. So I just want to acknowledge them as two mighty and formidable women in leadership, and I want to wish you both the very, very best in the future. A moment of girl power, I feel, Count Corla. Rare enough in these chambers. Anyway. Taoiseach, 2/3 of people believe it's harder than ever to buy a first home. That's the stark finding from new research published today. This sentiment is felt particularly strongly amongst young people. And the reality is that bad government policy and decision-making has literally shattered housing affordability for an entire generation. Look no further than the fiasco at Oscar Traynor Park in Coolock. Here, government will ask people to pay between €400,000 and €475,000 for a 3-bedroom home under your so-called affordable housing scheme. For a 1-bed, it's between €264,000 and €309,000. How are these prices affordable, Taoiseach? They might be affordable if you're well off or very well paid, but remember, this is supposed to be a scheme to help those on low and middle incomes to buy a home of their own. The reason the prices of these homes is beyond the reach of working people is the government insistence that public land at the site be sold to a private developer. What government should have done, and what Sinn Féin called for at the time, was to fund Dublin City Council to develop social and affordable homes on the site. But Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil couldn't stomach that. So despite Dublin City Council initially voting down the proposal, government pushed and pushed for this site to be sold to that private developer. To grease the wheels, a commitment was made that 3-bedroom homes in the development would be sold for between €250,000 and €306,000. Furthermore, that these prices would be fixed and not affected by inflation. But here we are, 4 years on, and no such thing. So much for those commitments. What's worse, Taoiseach, is that you now propose to do the same thing with the old DIT site at Ainger Street. You've decided to transfer that state land to a private developer without condition. You've exempted the developer from building social and affordable homes on what is prime city centre land. More bad decision-making, a huge mistake again with your eyes wide open. The land at Ainger Street should be transferred to Dublin City Council to deliver social and affordable housing. Transferring state land to commercial developers is a disaster for housing affordability. So the way forward must be to keep public land in public ownership and have councils or approved housing bodies deliver genuinely affordable housing. Tá rialtas seo cuireadh bhain polasa has spána nach bhfuil aon clú acu, conas tithe freisréasúnta a chur fáil. Is é réiteach na faibanna tithe a thógáil halamh puiblí féidir le gná daoine agus ibrithe in ann a cheannach. Taoiseach, do you accept that prices of €400,000, €475,000 for a 3-bedroom home through a government affordable housing scheme is absurd? Do you believe that that is actually affordable? And why on earth are you making another big mistake in relation to the Ainger Street site? Transferring prime state-owned land to a private developer, exempting them from delivering social and affordable housing, is nothing short of madness, Taoiseach.
Well, thanks very much, Ceann Corla, and I too want to begin by paying tribute to Deputy Shortall and Deputy Murphy on your your significant decision. I want to acknowledge you both as very formidable politicians. I believe Deputy Shortall is the longest-serving female TD in the history of our state, and that in and of itself is a historic record which deserves commendation. Through your work on Sláinte care, you brought parties together with different views to try and find common ground. And to Deputy Murphy, I know you've served for around 30 years in various political roles in your community and in Dáil Éireann, and I think you'll always be remembered as a particularly diligent and efficient member of the PAC, and of course you've both played a major role in founding your political party, so I want to wish you both and your families every happiness and good health now and into the future. I want to thank Deputy McDonald for raising this very important issue. And let's start on something that I know we can agree on, that for far too many people in this country, they do still feel that home ownership is out of reach. And we are working to change that. And I accept the bona fides of all political parties in this House who bring forward ideas and policies as to how they would change it. But I also think it is important to say to those people seeking to buy homes in our country that real progress is being made. That every single working day so far this year in Ireland, we're seeing 321 new homes commence construction. Every single working day, 321. So far this year, I'll get to affordability now. So far this year, we're seeing around 500 people a week buy their first home. So sometimes you get the impression from you that nobody's buying a house, that there's nothing happening. And simply that's not the reality. 500 people every single week. On top of that, on the social side of things, on the social housing side of things, we've seen the largest number of social houses allocated last year than any time since the 1970s. Never in my lifetime were there more social homes allocated last year as there were before. So we are making very significant progress in relation to housing supply. Now, I think it's regrettable that you misrepresent the government's position, conveniently, on Ainger Street. And I think it's particularly regrettable because you know the story better than probably most, you and Minister Donoghue and others who are TDs for Dublin Central. Because this House would have passed legislation, which I'd say you voted for the Grange Gorman Development Authority. And that set up an organisation in law that was charged with disposing of state properties, including at Ainger Street, disposing of them, it's in the law, it's in the functions of the law, disposing of them, and putting the money that's generated from that into your constituency, into Grange Gorman. In one of the most incredible transformative projects. I think you described it as your university when you visited there in February, and we're looking on in great marvel at the huge contribution it's made to education in your community, but much more widely than just your community. So it has always been known by you, I'd imagine by those you met in TU Dublin that day, that these properties would be disposed of, and that every cent of money, every cent, would go into the delivery of education. So you'll excuse me if I don't tolerate or buy the faux outrage here today, because you know well the law in relation to the GDA. You also know that when we passed the Land Development Act, the Land Development Agency Act, legislation that I think you opposed, you also know that specifically in that legislation, it references the Grange Gorman Development Authority as well. So there's no big gotcha moment here. The government position in relation to the disposal of DIT properties has always been clear. Dispose and put the money into education in your constituency to the transformative Grange Gorman campus. We also checked with the LDA, and the LDA in writing would have confirmed to government that they weren't planning on developing that site anyway for housing. In relation to Oscar Traynor Woods as well, again, you're cherry-picking figures. The reality of the situation is, across Ireland, the affordable purchase homes under government schemes, the average price is €267,000. €267,000. Of course, when you have A-rated homes in certain parts of the city, you can see higher figures. But we now have, on Oscar Traynor Woods, house prices that are 19 to 21% lower than market prices. And these are facts that are worth repeating.
Deputy McDonald.
So, you see, the problem is, Taoiseach, that you won't answer the question. Is €400,000, €475,000 affordable for those people in need of an affordable home? You won't accept either that transferring public land to private developers is simply the wrong policy. It is not the way to develop and deliver truly affordable homes. And you should not be transferring a prime inner city location, land so rare between the canals, for private development. That should go from the university to Dublin City Council for development. That's what should happen. So This morning we saw the publication of an ESRI report that had been commissioned by your Housing Minister about housing need. And incredibly, it only looked to the future. It took absolutely no account of the tens of thousands of people who currently need a home today, who need a home now. So you actually couldn't make this stuff up. It's actually very little wonder, Taoiseach, that the Housing Commission threw the book at you and said very clearly what we need is a radical transformation in housing policy. They were right, and we need that transformation now.
Position that you accept every recommendation in the Housing Commission report. Is that your position? Because we've written to you on the issue, we're awaiting your response as a government, and if it is the Sinn Féin position that you accept every recommendation in the Housing Commission report, you might just clarify that. I'll sit down if you want to clarify. Is it your position? Yes or no? Yes or no?
I am happy to say to you that we accept the finding of the Housing Commission that your policy is failing and failing miserably. Please answer my question. Answer my question about affordability, Taoiseach, if you could. Thank you. Thank you. I'm obliged.
So I gave the leader of the opposition an opportunity to say yes, she accepts all the recommendations, or no, she didn't, and she refuses to answer. Because you wrap yourself in reports when it suits you, but you're not a details person. You're refusing to get down into the details. Which recommendations are you in favour of, and which recommendations are you against? Thank you very much to the chorus behind you, trying to assist you, but I'm well able to answer the question. Thanks very much. Affordability very much depends on a person's circumstances. I'm sure what you think is affordable would be very different to other people, Deputy McDonald. I'm sure what I would or other people in this House. That's why we provide a range of housing solutions. The average cost of an affordable home under our schemes is $267,000, and for anybody watching in, Sinn Féin would abolish the first home scheme. They'd abolish the Help to Buy scheme. You would. I've answered the question. Please. And the reality of the situation is you promised people in Ireland the 300,000 home in Dublin. 72 hours before the local elections, you admitted that was bogus.
Thank you. Could we stop?
I answered the question. You just don't like the answer.
Please. Stop the heckling. Deputy Holly Cairns, please. Deputy Holly Cairns. Please, could we have a little bit of maturity, please?
Deputy Cairns, and on the outset, I want to acknowledge the announcement of my friends and colleagues, Catherine Murphy and Roisin Shorthall, that they aren't contesting the next general election. Catherine and Roisin are trailblazers in Irish politics and have accomplished an incredible amount in careers that spanned decades of committed political work and dedicated public service, not least of which was setting up the Social Democrats and helping to grow the party to where it is today with 6 TDs and 35 councillors. Catherine and Roisin are stepping back from frontline politics, but they leave behind a legacy, a party with strong roots, huge potential and enormous promise. On a personal level, it's hard to articulate. I think the impact they've had on me, I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for them, and I want to thank them for their support. And on behalf of the party, I want to thank them for all of their hard work and congratulate them on their incredible careers. Taoiseach, what we're witnessing in Gaza is beyond horror. It's the stuff of unrelenting nightmares. For 9 months, the Israeli army has bombed, maimed and tortured a starved and captive population. Their aim isn't self-defence, it's annihilation. According to a report from Save the Children, more than 14,000 children in Gaza have been killed and 21,000 children are missing. The report said children are also among those found in mass graves recently, with many showing signs of torture. This is the reality of the Israeli government's barbarity and cruelty. Gaza is now a graveyard for children, and still the slaughter continues in the full glare of the media spotlight. The publicity doesn't make a difference. Most Western governments have lost interest in even pretending to care. It seems that all you need to do to get away with genocide is to continue the relentless killing until the genocide becomes normalised. Taoiseach, the government has talked tough on this issue, but what have you really done to apply meaningful pressure on Israel to stop this massacre? Trade with Israel is continuing. The Israeli ambassador is still in situ, and travel visas for those committing atrocities in the occupied territories are still facilitated. The genocide continues, but it's business as usual with the Israeli government. Your office sent me on a brief note explaining why the government refuses to enact the Occupied Territories Bill. It says the government has disavowed the bill for, quote, legal, political and practical reasons. I and many others don't agree with the legal reasons, but I have to say I find it troubling and offensive that the political and practical reasons would be cited as a stumbling block to action. We're talking about 100,000 people who have been either killed, injured, or are missing. Yet the government's too concerned with politics and practicalities to take action outside of the welcome recognition of the State of Palestine. Taoiseach, I've asked this question a lot of times, but I'll keep doing it until we see action from the government. What are you going to do to apply meaningful pressure on Israel? Why won't you take the unilateral action like enacting the Occupied Territories Bill? And can you tell me when that updated legal advice on the Occupied Territories Bill was received? Because a lot of people believe that it should change in light of the ongoing genocide.
Taoiseach, please.
So on becoming Taoiseach, Deputy Cairns, I asked again in relation to the legality of the Occupied Territories Bill, and the same position has been reiterated to me as has been reiterated to my predecessors, and indeed the same position has been reiterated to me by the Attorney General that would have been reiterated by his predecessors as well. I fully accept your bona fides and that this is a point of difference, but the very clear legal advice to me, which would be the same as the legal advice available to you, I believe, if you were in my position, is that the bill is not compatible because these matters are dealt with at a European level. What I can tell you, and what I absolutely can tell you, is that Ireland continues to push at a European level to change policy in relation to the association agreement between the EU and Israel, because I do share your view, I do strongly share your view, that it can't be business as usual in relation to that association agreement. I share that view, Spain shares that view, Belgium somewhat shared that view recently, but it still remains a minority view amongst member states of the European Union. And that is frustrating to say, but it is a truthful portrayal that I can give you from my engagement at the European Council as recently as last week. Ireland did make amendments to the conclusions of the European Council last week, specifically around the International Court of Justice and the very clear orders of that court, particularly in May in relation to Rafah, and significantly strengthened the language of the European Union's conclusions in relation to that also. We've repeatedly called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and we are continuing to work at every opportunity with partners in the region, in the Middle East, including the King of Jordan, whom I've spoken to, and in the EU, to build momentum for peace efforts. I specifically discussed the issue with President Biden as well. But I do now fear that there's going to be that the actual stability of the Palestinian Authority is now an additional cause of concern. And I'm already working at an EU level, and I've already spoken to the President of the European Commission twice about this issue in the last week, as to what role the European Union can play in stabilising financially the position of the Palestinian Authority, which is absolutely key, I believe, to protecting the state of Palestine and ensuring that there is a state of Palestine to engage with the two-state solution. That's absolutely essential. So I'm aware of the horrific situation. I'm haunted by it, as I know are people right across this country. But Ireland continues to use its voice at every single opportunity, in every single international fora. We don't just say things, we vote that way internationally. We don't just say things, we amend conclusions that way. We don't just say things, we provide extra humanitarian assistance, we stand by UNRWA, and we will continue to look for every opportunity. And at a European level, Europe is not where it needs to be.
The Taoiseach, Deputy Cairns.
Every day in Gaza brings a new atrocity, and today isn't any different. The hospital in Khan Yunis has been basically evacuated. So that this morning the World Health Organization issued a plea to the Israeli government. So now we have powerful organizations basically just pleading with the Israeli government to not commit war crimes. I don't know how much longer we have to sit back and watch that kind of savagery continue and not just refuse to take action, but actually reward those who've facilitated it. So you say you agree with much of what I said, and that you're aware and that you're haunted by it. But incredibly, the Irish government is supporting Ursula von der Leyen as the next European Commission President. Fine Gael at least were honest about their intentions in advance of the election, but honesty isn't a word that can credibly be attached to the position of Fianna Fáil on this issue. Von der Leyen and the EU institution don't care about the massacre of Palestinians. That's the reality. And while the Irish government professes outrage and solidarity with Palestinians, you're simultaneously supporting von der Leyen and therefore trade with Israel. And that has actually increased since this started. Taoiseach, can you explain how that adds up? How are you using every available opportunity, as you just said, when you support her for a second term?
Taoiseach, please.
Because her position is entirely misrepresented. And if you were at the European Council, as I was last week, no, hang on, I was the only Irish person in the room, so maybe allow me the courtesy of telling the Irish Dáil what happened. So when I was there last week, every single Prime Minister and President, bar one, the Hungarian, supported, or indeed in the case of Italy, abstained. Every other single person supported, including socialist governments. In fact, the Prime Minister of Spain, who's probably seen as an extraordinarily strong supporter of Palestine, supported President von der Leyen. So this attempt in Ireland to characterise the inertia at an international level in relation to the Middle East around one individual is misplaced. It's Ursula von der Leyen who significantly increased the UNRWA aid budget, and it's her who right now is working on financial packages of support for the Palestinian Authority. So she has been somewhat successfully, though there I'm not sure how successful it was actually when you look at the outcome of elections across Europe, but there was an effort to create her as some sort of bogey woman. It doesn't tally at all with the actions that she's taking. And the fact that socialist prime ministers, centrist prime ministers, presidents supported Ursula von der Leyen after an election of 180 million citizens speaks very clearly to her credentials.
Deputy Mick Barry, please.
Taoiseach, it's possible that corporations made profits in excess of €300 billion in this state last year. Unfortunately, working people did not fare as well. Yes, most workers did get pay increases, but the majority of those pay increases did not match the rate of inflation and therefore were de facto pay cuts. Maybe this goes some way to explaining why a majority of people who expressed a view when polled by Red C last week supported the pilots. A group of workers seeking a pay increase from a greedy company making massive profits is something a lot of people can identify with. Aer Lingus made profits of €225 million last year. Their parent company, IAG, made an eye-watering €3.5 billion. Executive pay at Aer Lingus has increased 66% since 2019, and only yesterday it was announced that Aer Lingus Chief Executive Officer Lynn Embleton had received a €269,000 share bonus just last week. Meanwhile, the pilots have not had a pay increase in 5 years. Now, this is the largest industrial relations dispute seen in the state in the 2020s, the biggest clash between the interests of capital and the interest of labour this decade. It is in the interests of every working person that the pilots would win their claim. Of course, we have had an orchestra of outrage led by the usual suspects from the capitalist establishment. Aer Lingus said that the pilot stand is insidious. Aer Lingus's great rival, Michael O'Leary, called it industrial blackmail. Your unshockable Taoiseach said it was shocking, and you yourself opted for utterly reprehensible. Never once did you recognise your own responsibility for the current state of affairs. Yes, your own responsibility, because Aer Lingus was privatised between 2006 and 2015. Who were the parties in power? First of all, Fianna Fáil and the Greens, then Fine Gael and, to their shame, the Labour Party. By selling off the national airline to a corporation, it was the likes of yourself and your party which opened the door to a scenario where Aer Lingus could quadruple its profits in a year while holding down wages by more than 20% over 5 years. You need to own your own mistake here, Taoiseach. So it's back to the Labour Court tomorrow. The Labour Court is no friend of working people in my book. If the pilots can get a cost of living increase there, I say good luck to them. But I would have my doubts. If the pilots are left by Aer Lingus with no choice but to escalate their action, they will continue to have my support. Escalation, if it is necessary, will be greeted in the capitalist press with howls of horror. But escalation can serve to bring the dispute to a head more quickly and increase the chance of a settlement which does justice to the pilot's claim, which, as I said earlier, is in the interests of all working people.
Thank you, Deputy Barry. Taoiseach.
Yeah, I'm a bit perplexed. I'd say you must have struggled on this dispute because I didn't see this coming, but maybe I should have. Look, the first thing is I think it's highly regrettable, Cian Corda, that any member of this House would cast an aspersion on the Labour Court, because I think we have a long-standing industrial relations mechanism in this country with both the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court that is a key part of the infrastructure. And to say it's not the friend of the worker, I think it's just factually untrue. It's not there to be friend of anybody, by the way. It's there to arbitrate, mediate, and come up with solutions to very important things, and to come up with solutions and to bring about industrial peace. You may not be a fan of industrial peace. I personally place quite a significant value on it. So, thank you for your intervention today. I do know, and I do know how upsetting this dispute is to people, and that is what I think is utterly reprehensible about this. Without casting a view on whether it's pilots or whether it's Aer Lingus, and there's always two sides to any dispute. I'm very aware of that. There's two sides to every dispute, and everybody's entitled to have a dispute, and everyone's entitled to put in a pay claim. But people are entitled to go on their holidays too. And parents, including in your own constituency, who set aside a few bob to go on a summer holiday with their kids, who are now anxiously checking their social media feeds and websites to find out if that holiday can go ahead. I feel for them. It's their side that I'm on. It's the side of the travelling public. It's the side of the people in your own constituency who might own a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a restaurant or a cafe, who are hoping and relying on tourists coming in over the next number of weeks to help them get through what can be a long winter. So that's the side we should be on in this House, not deciding to be divisive, not deciding to pit one group against the other, but to actually speak up for our own citizens who are trying to go on a holiday, our own people who are trying to go about their business, and our people in this country and the tourism sector, which is particularly dependent. So my position, the government's position, has been crystal clear. We want to see engagement. We want to see meaningful engagement. And as I've said, I don't think there's ever been an industrial relations dispute that has been resolved without two things: engagement and compromise. They're always the ingredients to any solution to any dispute. Now, the question for both parties is, do you wish to do that now and save everybody the pain, the agony, the hassle, and the economic impact? Or do you wish to drag this thing out and then end up doing it anyway? Because there's absolutely no doubt there's going to be engagement and there's going to be compromise. That's how you solve industrial relations disputes. So I would hope that you would agree with me that the most important thing tomorrow is for both parties to attend the Labour Court in good faith, to engage in the process in a real and meaningful way, to be respectful of the role of the Labour Court, which I'm not sure you were, and to sort this out, and to stay there as long as it takes until they sort it out. And I say to both parties, there needs to be a willingness to compromise, and there needs to be a willingness to engage. So I very much welcome, Cian Corda, the fact that parties have agreed to attend together at the Labour Court tomorrow. I thank the Labour Court for the intensive work it's done in the background of this in recent days. And I really do hope that this can help put the matter on a pathway to resolution before there's any further upset or any further damage caused to the travelling public or to the Irish economy.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Barry.
So let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow, representatives of Aer Lingus will walk into the Labour Court, a company which made €225 million profits last year, quadrupling, part of an international group which made €3.5 billion in profit. And they will sit across the table from pilots who have not had a pay increase in 5 years. Of course, I do not want to see a strike. The pilots do not want to see a strike. But the issue is, will they have the opportunity to go back to work with a decent cost of living pay increase which covers the cost of living increases in the last 5 years? If they do, it will be settled. If not, it could be a very different matter. Taoiseach, in order to make the atmosphere better for tomorrow, I want to ask you a question. Aer Lingus are leasing planes and crew from non-union airlines like privilege-style airlines to break the industrial action of the pilots. This is an extremely provocative move, tantamount to union busting. It is opposed both by trade unionists in Ireland and trade unionists in that airline's country of origin, Spain. You talk about the need for compromise and to avoid escalation. So give me a straight answer to a straight question. Will you call on Aer Lingus here today on the floor of the Dáil to cease this provocative activity and stop using non-unionised airlines to do this work?
It seems we have the spokesperson for Pilots Before Profit today, and thank you for that intervention. I mean, the reality is my position is very clear. It's crystal clear. It couldn't be clearer. It is not for me on the floor of the Dáil, or respectfully you that you're perfectly entitled to, in my view, to give a view on which side is to blame, or to apportion blame, or to accuse one side of being provocative, and I haven't done that. I've stood up and accepted that any worker is entitled to submit a pay claim, and of course to use all of the mechanisms available to them to seek a resolution. What I am saying, though, is that it is really important that the opportunity tomorrow is seized. There's been a lot of work that has gone into preparing for tomorrow. Late on Friday afternoon, the Labour Court invited Aer Lingus and IALPA to fresh talks. They commenced at 2:30 yesterday afternoon. This follows direct discussions between the parties last week, which broke down following 5 hours of talks. Discussions between the parties at the Labour Court yesterday concluded sometime after 11 p.m. and I want to acknowledge the hard yards and long hours that everybody put in yesterday, following which we now have the court saying that it will formally intervene. So it's not for me to now add to new aspects to the dispute or new elements that you wish to raise today. It's now reported that the Labour Court has requested that both parties submit final written submissions by close of business today. Let that be the focus. Let there be a court hearing tomorrow, and let's find a resolution to this dispute for once and for all, so people can go on their holidays and go about their business.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Thomas Pringle, please.
Taoiseach, I visited the Ardra Community Childcare Centre yesterday, and I was horrified to see the effect that defective blocks are having on the building. Ardra Community Childcare opened a purpose-built premises in the heart of Ardra town in 2007, after securing funding from the EU for a special programme for peace and reconciliation, and with the help of many local fundraising initiatives in Ardra. Since then, it has provided vital childcare for hundreds of families in the area and the surrounding areas, and provides an essential after-school service for children attending 6 national schools close to the facility. There is no doubt that this childcare service is extremely important to the people of Ardra. Many people rely on this service, and many parents have stated that they would be unable to work without it. It was devastating for them to discover the findings of a recent defective block report, which showed significant defective concrete materials in all 5 tested areas, including the building's foundations. The report recommended that the building should be demolished and rebuilt due to the high levels of pyrite, pyrrhotite and free mica. However, disgracefully, there is no government funding available for this. Ardra Community Centre Community Childcare is a community organisation with a voluntary board of directors who have charitable status. We have been telling the government since the introduction of the redress scheme that defective blocks would be found in buildings such as this, yet the government refused to listen, and now community organisations such as Ardra Community Childcare are faced with this dire situation through no fault of their own. They are in this position because of the government's light touch regulation, and now the government refuses to address or rectify the effect that this light touch regulation has had on community buildings across Donegal. In response to a question regarding Ardra Community Childcare, Minister O'Gorman stated that this is a unique situation. I dispute this completely. This is certainly not a unique situation, and the government would know this if they'd listened to the opposition and the people affected from the beginning. Taoiseach, defective blocks are having a detrimental effect on many important services across Donegal already, such as Rafo Community Child Group and Letterkenny Community Childcare as well, and this is only the beginning. As the years go on, we will start to see the effect of defective blocks on far more community and public buildings in Donegal across the whole country. Taoiseach, you must address this now before the issue gets completely out of hand and many vital services are forced to close as a result. There is no way the likes of Ardra Community Childcare would be able to raise the amount of money required to demolish and rebuild a building as a small community. Without vital government funding, they will be forced to close their doors during a crisis in childcare, and this will be devastating for the town of Ardra. So, Taoiseach, what are you going to do and your government going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen and that these defective buildings and defective blocks will actually be remedied?
Thank you very much, Deputy Pringle. Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Ciarán Corley, and thanks to Deputy Pringle for raising 2 important issues which have clearly intertwined here: the issue of the defective concrete blocks, and particularly today in relation to your question, the devastating impact that that's having now in your constituency in relation to community childcare facilities, and your specific reference in relation to Ardra, but also your reference to Rafo and to Letterkenny as well. What I can tell you today is that I know Minister O'Gorman's department is aware of the service that you referenced specifically in relation to Ardra, and it is aware of the impact that defective blocks are having on that service. My understanding is that the department is now examining how it can use existing capital funding in the department and see if that could be repurposed to try and assist in that case. My understanding is that Minister O'Gorman and his officials are working on this through what they call their department's sustainability process. So I do want you to know that there's an awareness in government in relation to this issue, and there is a real willingness to try and engage and to come up with a solution, perhaps separate and distinct to the broader issue in relation to defective concrete blocks in the existing scheme as well, because I know a lot of work has gone in to that enhanced scheme that is now open for applications, and I know the final regulations were the result of extensive consultation with key stakeholders, and the new scheme is now providing very considerable enhancements. And as we discussed in the past, I think there's been 1,644 applications received to the previous scheme and another 514 to the enhanced scheme as of the end of May. But what you're clearly highlighting here today is I'm not suggesting it's a new issue, it's certainly a new issue to me, in the sense that there's now community childcare facilities outside the scope of the scheme being impacted by defective blocks. Obviously, government will need to take that extremely seriously. I'm pleased that Minister O'Gorman and his department have an awareness of it. They will engage on the issue, and I know they are currently actively examining how their own existing capital funding could perhaps be repurposed to assist in this case, and perhaps I'd suggest that the Minister might engage with you directly on the matter too.
Thank you, Taoiseach, and thank you for the response, and Mr. Gorman as well, because it is vitally important that this is recognised. But I do think that you need, as a whole of government, to actually take the approach that this is a crisis that is going to get worse. Because there is community buildings right across Donegal, and there's private buildings, there's factories, there's farm buildings, everything that are all going to be collapsing over the next couple of years because of the defective concrete crisis. And it's going to be widen out across the whole country as well, because this is not only a Donegal issue. It has been highlighted in Donegal in the first sense, where it's the worst place, but it is going to expand across the whole country. And you need to get on top of it, and your government needs to actually deal with this. And what you could do as well is you could amend IS 465 to actually include pyrite and pyrrhotite as defective materials, and that is very simply done. And you could actually do that, and that would mean that a lot of people would be able to repair their houses as they stand at the minute. But that's a slightly different issue, but I would point to how the government is embracing this whole problem. And unfortunately, this is going to be a massive problem. And then how do you make sure that this never happens again in the future? You make sure that there's proper regulation put in place, and it's actually enforced, rather than doing away with regulation. Thank you.
No, I want to thank Deputy Pringle for raising this, and I acknowledge you raise it on a regular basis, as do colleagues in Donegal as well. And like at the outset, let me accept a statement to the obvious that you rightly said, and it's important to say that I know and government knows this isn't just a Donegal issue, and indeed my own note in here goes through obviously Mayo, Clare and Limerick as other areas that have been affected, and indeed government took a decision recently in terms of the inclusion of Sligo County Council as well. So I'm very much aware that this is an issue which perhaps first came to visibility in Donegal with devastating effects and worry and stress for people, but certainly is one that isn't exclusive to Donegal. Look, I do think, and we have a back and forth in this chamber, and that's one of the reasons it's here, to speak up for your constituents, but I would think government has endeavoured to make a real intervention here, an intervention of incredible scale. We are continuing to work our way through issues as they arise. You've brought another relatively new issue here in relation to community childcare. We're now engaging on that as well. What I won't be today, because I don't want to be disingenuous to people, is be prescriptive in terms of how we help that childcare community centre you've referenced in our draft. But let's ask Minister O'Gorman to continue his engagement and to revert to you directly.
Thank you, Taoiseach, and that concludes Leader's questions. If I could, for just a moment, join with those members who've recognised the very significant announcement made by Deputy Roisin Shortall and Deputy Catherine Murphy earlier today, and acknowledge the fact that you have had a truly reformative influence on politics in this country. I have known Roisin Shortall for many years from our days in the Eastern Health Board, when she was as forceful and direct in her views on health matters as she is today, and I've known Catherine for even longer. We served together on Kildare County Council, and she was outstanding as in her sincerity, in her dedication to the people. And her dedication was to people, not to any ideology, and to ensuring that the best possible public services were available. And I think it can be said that Catherine Murphy always played the ball and not the person. So I hope you have a very successful period ahead. And thank you for all that you've done. We move now to